The first time my VP refused to shake my hand, I told myself it was nothing. We were 10 minutes early for the client meeting, standing in the glass lobby of Caloran Biomedical, white marble, quiet fountains, security that watches your shoes as much as your badge. I'd rehearsed the opening in my head the whole drive. Calm, clean, no bravado. The deal was $8.4 million, a multi-site cold chain upgrade with a service contract that would make my year. I wasn't the face of our company, though. Not officially. That was Blaze Hardwick's job. Vice president, polished smile, the kind of man who never carried a laptop because someone else always carried it for him. I was the solutions lead. I built the numbers. I ran the pilots. I knew every failure mode and every clause that could blow up procurement. Blaze called me my guy in a way that sounded like praise and felt like ownership. "Keep it tight," he said as we waited. "Let me steer. You answer if asked. Don't volunteer." He said it like he was doing me a favor. The client's team came down the stairs in a small wave. 2 directors, 1 procurement analyst, clutching a folder, and then their CEO, Marisato, walking with that controlled speed that tells you she doesn't like wasting oxygen on unnecessary sentences. She shook Blaze's hand first, then she shook our legal counsel's hand. Then she looked straight at me, because I was the one she'd been emailing for weeks. The one who answered at midnight when her warehouse manager found temperature drift and panicked. She stepped toward me with a neutral expression and extended her hand. I stepped forward too, and Blay moved. It was subtle. A half step into my lane, body angled like a door. His hand lifted again. Too fast, too confident, intercepting the moment. Maris's hand stayed out, suspended in the air for a fraction too long. Blaze didn't notice. Or worse, he did. He kept talking, smiling, filling the space with warm executive noise. "Maurice, great to see you. We're excited to finally get you the stability you deserve." I felt my own hand hover, and then fall back to my side like I'd been corrected in public. Maris didn't pull her hand back quickly. She didn't glare. She didn't embarrass anyone. She just looked at me, then at Blay, then back at me again, and something in her eyes hardened, the way a lab tech's face changes when a sample is contaminated. We walked into the conference room. The chairs were already set, waters lined up, their procurement led Inez door sitting with a pad open like she was ready to write down the first lie someone told. Blaze took the seat at the head of the table without asking. I sat 1 chair away, slightly behind him, like a junior employee who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. He launched into the deck as if we hadn't already answered these questions in writing. He talked about partnership and shared vision. He said the word synergy once, and I saw Maris's jaw tighten. When Maris spoke, she didn't address Blaze. She addressed me. "Corin," she said, using my name like a calibration point. "In your email, you said your monitoring alerts have a 2-minute detection window. Is that still accurate under peak load?" I glanced at Blaze. He didn't look at me. He stared at his own slide as if the presentation was a shield. "Yes," I said. 2 minutes under peak load, assuming the gateway is configured as we specified. The bottleneck isn't detection, it's escalation. That's why we map the notification chain to your on-call rotation. Maris gave a small nod. That was approval in her language. Blaze jumped back in immediately, voice a little too loud. "Exactly. And that's why we're the best in class." I watched Maris's gaze flick to Inez, then back to Blaze. It was the kind of look people exchange when they've just learned something important, without needing to say it out loud. Blaze kept pushing. He started negotiating in the room. Discounts, timelines. "We can be flexible. The way you do when you want the win more than you want the terms to be correct." Inez finally set her pen down. "Before we proceed," she said calmly, "we need to confirm who holds operational accountability post-signature." Blaze smiled. "That would be our team." Inez didn't move. "Name and title." Blaze glanced at me for the first time, quick and sharp. "This is Corin," he said like he was introducing a technician. "He built the solution." Maris leaned back slightly. Who signs the service credits if performance fails? Blaze laughed lightly. Maris, you won't need to worry about that. Silence landed on the table. The kind of silence that isn't awkward, just surgical. Maris folded her hands. We do worry about that. That's procurement's job. Then she looked at me again, not unkindly. More like she was confirming a hypothesis. Corin, she asked, if your VP is unavailable, who has authority to approve field changes without restarting procurement? I answered honestly because it was my job to keep this real. Under our current structure, I don't, I said. Authority sits with executive leadership or legal, depending on the clause. Blaze's smile tightened, just for a second. Maris nodded once, like she'd reached the end of an experiment. Thank you, she said. Then she turned to Inez. Pause procurement. Blaze blinked, still smiling like he hadn't heard correctly. I'm sorry, pause? Inez closed her folder. We're freezing the award pending governance clarification. Blaze leaned forward. This is a misunderstanding. We're aligned. Let's not overreact. Maris stood. Smoothly, no drama. I'm not overreacting, she said. I'm preventing a risk. Then she looked at Blaze as if he was a line item. If you can't acknowledge your own team in the lobby, she added, voice level, you won't protect them when this turns into a problem. And I don't sign contracts with companies that treat accountability like a performance. She nodded once, dismissal, not anger, and left the room with her team trailing behind her. We sat there with our untouched water bottles like props after the play had ended. Blaze exhaled through his nose and finally turned to me. What did you say? He asked quietly. I answered what she asked, I said. His eyes stayed on me a beat too long. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and the color drained from his face. Not much, but enough for me to notice. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, Send me your notes. Full recap. Every word. Now. He walked out like he still owned the hallway. I stayed seated for a second, staring at the empty chair where Maris had been, because I knew what came next in companies like mine. The deal didn't just freeze. Someone had to be blamed for the ice, and the first person leadership blames is the one they already treated like they weren't supposed to exist. Blaze didn't speak to me on the ride back. He sat in the back seat of the car service, scrolling on his phone with the same expression he wore during earnings calls. Calm, distant, like bad news was something other people were paid to carry. Our general counsel, Tamsin Rowe, typed quietly beside him. I stared out the window at traffic and replayed the meeting frame by frame, not because I enjoyed it, because I needed to know where the knife would land. When we got back to the office, Blaze didn't go to his floor. He went straight to the executive wing, and I already understood what that meant. The story was being written without me in the room. By the time I reached my desk, there was a calendar invite waiting. Client debrief, procurement pause. No agenda, mandatory, 30 minutes. Attendees, Blaze, Tamsin, HR, business partner, sales ops. I leaned back and exhaled once, slow. Then I opened my notebook and started building my own version of the story. Not feelings. Not interpretations, just sequence. Who was where? Who said what? What was asked? What was answered? Because in corporate disasters, the first casualty isn't the deal. It's the timeline. I pulled up the email thread with Caloran. Every response I'd sent, every attachment, the pilot results, the escalation chart I'd built for their on-call rotation. I exported the conversation to PDF and saved it to a folder I controlled. Then I grabbed the meeting notes from our last internal prep. Blaze's own comments included. One line stood out, typed by sales ops during rehearsal. Keep Corin in support role. Exec presence matters. Support role. Like I was a piece of equipment. At the debrief, Blaze arrived 3 minutes late, on purpose. He wanted the room already oriented around him. He sat down, clasped his hands, and opened with a tone that sounded sympathetic and was actually surgical. "Well," he said, "that was unexpected." HR, Lena Marr, offered the usual corporate softness. "We're here to understand what happened and how to protect the relationship." Blaze nodded slowly. "Exactly. And we need to be honest about where the breakdown occurred." His eyes flicked toward me like a laser finding a target. Tamsin didn't look up from her laptop. "Let's keep this clean. Facts only." Blaze smiled. "Facts are exactly what I want." Then he leaned back, crossed one leg, and said it. Corin answered a governance question in a way that alarmed the client. There it was, the first sentence of the new story. I didn't react. I let him finish, because people like Blay always reveal more when you don't interrupt. "He made it sound like we don't have control," Blaze continued. "He implied he lacks authority. That undermines confidence. It escalated procurement's concerns." Sales ops, Jude Pell chimed in carefully. "To be fair, that was the structure we discussed." Blaze cut him off with a polite hand. "Jude, I'm not debating structure. I'm talking about how it was communicated." Lena from HR turned to me, voice gentle. "Corin, do you want to respond?" I looked at her and nodded once. Calm. "I answered the question accurately," I said, "because inaccurate answers become contract disputes." Blaze let out a tiny laugh, like I'd said something naive. "That's a nice principle. But the client didn't need the whole internal org chart." Tamsin finally looked up. "What exactly did Maris ask?" I kept my eyes on Tamsin, not Blay. She asked who had authority to approve field changes without restarting procurement. I said authority sits with executive leadership or legal, depending on the clause. Tamsin's face didn't change. "That's true." Blaze leaned forward slightly. "But you didn't frame it. You didn't reassure. You intercepted her handshake," I said before I could stop myself. The room went quiet. Blaze's eyes widened a fraction. Then the smile returned, colder. "Excuse me?" he said. I felt my pulse push once, hard, but my voice stayed level. "Maris offered me her hand. I reached out. You stepped in front and redirected. She noticed. That's when her tone changed." Jude shifted in his chair like he suddenly wished he'd scheduled a dentist appointment. Lena blinked. "Is that accurate?" Blaya's voice stayed smooth. "That's a creative interpretation of a normal greeting." "It wasn't normal," I said. "It signaled hierarchy. And Caloran is sensitive to governance, optics, and accountability. They operate like regulated pharma. They read signals." Tamsin's fingers stopped typing. Was anyone else there? Jude cleared his throat. "I was. It happened fast, but yes, it was noticeable." Blaze's jaw tightened, microscopic. "So now we're blaming a handshake." "No," I said. "We're acknowledging cause and effect." Blaze pushed his chair back an inch, as if giving himself room to maneuver. "This isn't about cause and effect. It's about salvage. And right now, Caloran is questioning competence. That's a relationship risk." Then he turned to HR again. "We need to tighten client comms. One voice. No improvisation." His eyes landed on me again. "One voice," I repeated quietly, more to myself than to him. Because that phrase never means alignment. It means control. After the meeting, Blaze didn't walk out with me. He walked out with Lena and Tamsin, heads close, like a private huddle. I went back to my desk and found a new email from Sales Ops. Subject, Caloran follow-up request. It was a forwarded message from Inez Door. Short, polite, sharp. They wanted written confirmation of our governance model. Named operational owner. Post-signature clarification on who could approve field changes. A revised risk register for cold chain failures. And, this part made my stomach drop, a statement explaining why their CEO was not allowed to shake hands with the solutions lead. So no, it wasn't in my head. They were documenting the disrespect. And if a client is documenting disrespect, it's already bigger than feelings. It's compliance. I forwarded the email to Blaze and Tamsin with one line. Attached is their request. They specifically referenced the handshake. Blaze replied within 2 minutes, 2 sentences. Stop escalating this. I will handle Corin. Do not contact them directly. Do not contact them directly. He wasn't trying to save the deal. He was trying to control the narrative. I stared at the message, then opened my calendar. Because if Blaze was blocking me from the client, my only leverage was internal. And internally, leverage only exists in one place, in writing. So I drafted a clean memo, fact-based, unemotional, and attached the exported email thread, pilot results, and the internal rehearsal note that called me a support role. Then I sent it to Tamsin, Lena, and Jude. Subject line, Corin. Factual timeline plus governance risk exposure. No accusations, no drama, just a timeline. And one sentence at the bottom. If we respond inconsistently, procurement will interpret it as governance instability and extend the freeze. It wasn't a threat. It was physics. That night, around 9, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. A quiet voice. Female. Controlled. Corin, she said. This is Maris? My chest tightened. You weren't supposed to call me, I said before thinking. I didn't call your VP, she replied. I called the person who actually knows what's real. Then she paused, and in that pause I heard something I didn't like. Not anger, disappointment, mixed with caution. Tell me something, Maris said. Is Blaze Hardwick the one who will be accountable when this fails? I didn't answer right away, because the truth was simple, but the consequences were not, and I realized in that moment the deal wasn't frozen because of what I said in the meeting. It was frozen because the client had just discovered something worse. Our leadership didn't look trustworthy, and now Maris was deciding whether to walk away or whether to pull the thread until the whole thing unraveled. But that was just the beginning. I didn't sleep after that call, not because Maris had my number. Clients find numbers all the time. I didn't sleep because she'd asked the one question that turns a deal into an investigation. Who will be accountable when this fails? In the morning, I didn't rush into the office like nothing happened. I moved like someone handling evidence. I wrote a short recap of the call, time, number, what she asked, what I said, what I didn't say. Then I forwarded it to Tamsin, our general counsel, with one line. Client CEO contacted me directly last night regarding governance accountability. I have not replied further. I didn't CC Blay, not yet, because if I alerted him too early, he'd do what he always did, jump ahead of the facts and rewrite them. At 10, Tamsin pinged me. Do not engage further. If she contacts you again, loop me in immediately. Also, come to legal. When legal calls you in without a calendar invite, you don't take the stairs casually. Tamsin's office didn't look like the movies. No mahogany, no big view. Just neat piles, muted lighting, and a whiteboard covered in contract clause numbers. She shut the door behind me. Tell me exactly what happened in the lobby, she said. So I did. The handshake, the intercept, Maris's expression changing, the procurement pause. Tamsin listened without blinking, then asked, Do we have lobby footage? I don't know, I said, but Corin does. Their security is strict. Tamsin nodded once. They'll keep it. And if procurement is documenting it, it's not just optics. It's governance risk. Then she asked the next question. Why does Maris trust you enough to call? I hesitated, because I actually answered her emails, and because I didn't sell her a story. Tamsin stared at me a moment. Corin, she said carefully, I need you to understand something. If the client believes our VP misrepresented accountability, they can demand a full governance appendix, and that pulls in audit logs, approval chains, delegation letters, everything. I swallowed. Is that bad? It's not bad if it's clean, she said. It's catastrophic if someone has been improvising authority. She didn't say Blaze's name. She didn't need to. When I left legal, my badge didn't work on the executive floor. It had always worked. I tried again. Beep. Red light. That was the moment my stomach dropped into something cold. They hadn't fired me. They'd isolated me. Because isolating someone doesn't require paperwork, it just requires a systems ticket. Back downstairs, I found an email from IT Ops. Subject: Access Adjustment Request. Per leadership. No explanation. No ticket number. Just a polite note that my executive floor access had been updated. I walked straight to Jude Pell in Sales Ops, the only person in that debrief who had blinked like a human. Did Blay request this? I asked. Jude looked uncomfortable. He said it was temporary. He said legal wanted it. I kept my voice flat. Legal didn't. Jude's eyes widened slightly. Corin, listen, I said. I'm not asking you to pick sides. I'm asking you to remember who asked you to lie first. Jude didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. That afternoon, Blaze sent a company-wide update to the deal team. Caloran procurement paused due to internal misalignment. We're realigning communications under executive direction. Internal misalignment. That's how you describe a human being when you want to turn them into a problem. Then my calendar auto-populated with something worse. Performance check-in. Solutions lead. Organized by HR. With Blay. And a director I'd never met. The meeting was at 4. I spent the next 3 hours doing something that sounds paranoid until you've lived through corporate politics. I built my timeline into a package that could survive hostile reading. Email, chain exports, pilot results, governance diagrams, the forwarded client request referencing the handshake, the memo I'd already sent to legal and HR, and the IT access change email. Everything in one folder, time-stamped, clean. Because if they tried to paint me as emotional or unstable, I wanted the documents to speak in a language they couldn't spin. At 4, I walked into the HR room. Blaze was already seated. Of course he was. HR Lena was there. Neutral face. And the new person, a director from corporate strategy named Corin Hale, sat with his hands folded like he'd been hired to watch a confession. Blaze opened with a sigh like he was tired of cleaning up my mess. Corin, he said, this is difficult. But the way you handled Caloran was not aligned with executive expectations. Lena said, this is not disciplinary. This is a check-in. That sentence is always a lie. Corin finally spoke, calm voice. We're evaluating whether you're a fit for client-facing work at your level. Client-facing work. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I didn't let it show. I slid my folder onto the table. This is the full timeline, I said, including their written request referencing the handshake, and the CEO contacting me directly because your executive response didn't address accountability. Blaze didn't touch the folder. He smiled like it was irrelevant. Corin, he said, you're missing the point. The client's perception is what matters. That's exactly the point, I replied. Their perception changed when you blocked their CEO from shaking my hand. That's when they questioned governance. Corin's eyes flicked to Blaze. Quick! Lena's mouth tightened slightly. She was trying not to react. Blaze's smile sharpened. Are you accusing me of... what? Sabotage? I'm saying the event happened, I said, and Caloran documented it. That's why procurement paused. That's why they demanded governance clarification. Corin tapped the folder lightly. Do we have confirmation of the lobby incident besides your statement? I didn't flinch. If Caloran's security footage exists, it will show it, and their email already confirms they noticed it. Blaze leaned forward, voice softer now, dangerous softness. You're overstepping, he said. You're trying to turn a social moment into a legal event. Tamsin's words from that morning echoed in my head. It's catastrophic if someone has been improvising authority. I looked at Blaze, then I looked at Lena, then at Corin, and I said the sentence that changed everything. If the client believes our VP misrepresented accountability, I said evenly, they can trigger a governance review clause. That will require us to produce delegation letters and approval chain documentation. If those don't align with what Blaze promised, we have exposure. Silence hit the room like a door closing. Lena's eyes widened, just slightly. Oren sat back, slow. Blaze didn't smile anymore. He stared at me, and in that stare I finally saw it. Not anger, not ego. Fear. Because fear is what you see when someone realizes the timeline isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. Oren cleared his throat. I think we need legal in this, he said. Blaze's voice came out tight. That's unnecessary. Oren didn't blink. No, it's necessary. And in that moment, I realized something else. This wasn't just a VP trying to humiliate me. This was a VP trying to keep something from being discovered. And I didn't know what it was yet. But I was about to find out. That night, my access got cut again. This time to the shared deal folder. And that's when I stopped being the polite employee trying to align. Because if they were locking me out, it meant the evidence was exactly where I thought it was. By the next morning, the deal folder wasn't just restricted. It was sanitized. The shared drive that used to hold our pilot reports, the escalation mapping, the governance appendix drafts, everything Caloran had ever asked for now looked like a staged apartment. Pretty, empty, no history. If you've never seen it happen, it sounds dramatic, but it isn't. It's boring, procedural, and fast. One access change, one cleanup, one version overwrite, and suddenly the truth becomes what's currently visible. I didn't storm into Blaze's office. I didn't email 100 people. That's what gets you labeled unstable. Instead, I opened my own archive, the exported thread, the pilot snapshots, the memo trail, and compared it against the current folder structure. Whole sections were missing. Not moved, not reorganized, missing. Then I found the second signal, a quiet message from Sales Ops. Jude, FYI, Blaze is sending a revised governance response to Caloran. Without legal. Without legal. That wasn't just arrogance. That was intent. I took the elevator down to the building's small IT help desk, where people still talked like humans if you spoke to them like one. The analyst on duty, a tired guy named Eamon Cleese, pulled up my access logs when I asked. What changed? I said. Not opinion. Just change history. He looked at the screen, then looked back at me like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to say it. I can tell you what the system shows, he said carefully. Do that. Eamon scrolled. Last night, he said, your permissions were removed from the Caloran workspace. Then a bulk permission change was applied to several folders. Then a new group was created, Executive Deal Control, and that group got ownership. Ownership, not access. Ownership is where the power is. Who requested it? I asked. Eamon hesitated. It's marked per leadership. The requester is corporate strategy. Oren Vale. So Oren wasn't just observing, he was moving levers. I thanked Eamon, kept my face neutral, and walked away with the only thing that mattered. A fact. A time. A chain. Then I went to legal. Tamsin didn't act surprised when I told her. She just inhaled once and said, forward me the access change notice. I didn't get a notice, I said. That made her finally look up. Then we request it, she said, and we do it in writing. She opened a draft email to IT governance and added me, Lena from HR, and after a beat, Oren Vale. Subject, preservation request, Caloran workspace access and revision history. She didn't accuse, she didn't speculate. She asked for two things, audit logs and version history exports for the workspace, including who changed permissions and who edited or removed files, a legal hold without using the dramatic words. Then she sent it, and with that one email, the entire situation shifted. Because now the timeline wasn't mine versus Blaze's, it was in the system. Blaze called me 5 minutes later. Not a message. A call. He never called. Corin, he said, voice too calm. What are you doing? I'm preserving the record, I replied. You're creating a hostile narrative, he said. You're making it look like we're hiding something. I'm making sure we can answer the client consistently, I said. He exhaled like I was exhausting him. You're not authorized to run this through legal. I didn't, I said. Legal ran it through legal. There was a pause, then his tone changed, just enough for me to hear the blade come out. If you keep pushing, you'll burn your career here. I didn't raise my voice. Then you should have let the client shake my hand. He hung up. An hour later, the first real chaos hit. Maris Sato forwarded a message, not to Blaze, not to sales, directly to legal and HR, with me copied. It was short, and it was worse than anger. She wrote that Caloran would not proceed until they received a signed governance appendix naming who could authorize field changes, confirmation of delegation authority, matching what was stated in the meeting, and an explanation, for the record, of the handshake incident as a signal of internal accountability. Then she added one final sentence. They were considering informing their board that vendor governance appears unstable. In regulated environments, that's not an insult. That's a formal warning. Within minutes, Lena from HR messaged me, "Stay available. Do not reply to Caloran. Legal is handling." Oren, meanwhile, booked an emergency meeting. Executive direction, Caloran. This time I wasn't invited, but Tamsin was. And when legal is invited, and the solutions lead is not, it tells you exactly what's happening. They're trying to negotiate reality. I did the only thing I could do without overstepping. I sent Tamsin a single packet, clean, organized, containing my exported client thread the original pilot results, the forwarded procurement request mentioning the handshake, the internal rehearsal note that positioned me as support role, and Eamon's note, time-stamped access change facts, no opinions. Then I sat and waited, not passively, strategically, because in corporations the loud person loses. The person with the best documentation wins. That afternoon, Jude sent me a message that made my hands go cold. He wrote, "Blaze is telling them you freelanced governance and scared the client. He wants to remove you from the account permanently." So that was the move. Isolate me, blame me, and then present removal as remediation. I didn't reply to Jude. I didn't argue. I just added that message to my timeline. At 6, Tamsin called me. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear steel underneath. "They asked us for delegation letters," she said. "Do we have them?" I asked. Long pause. "We have drafts," she said, "and we have inconsistencies." "Inconsistencies how?" Tamsin chose each word like it cost money. "Blaze represented authority that isn't formally delegated. He's been approving scope adjustments through email and presenting them as binding." My mouth went dry. "That's not allowed," I said. "It's not clean," she replied, "and Caloran knows it." Then she said the sentence that told me the truth about why Blaze had blocked that handshake in the first place. "Maris doesn't trust Blaze," she said. "She trusts you. And Blaze can't stand the idea that you're the accountability anchor." I stared at my desk, at the neat folder of evidence I'd built, and suddenly the whole story snapped into focus. The handshake wasn't a social slight. It was an executive instinct to erase the person who could expose the gap between what he promised and what he was authorized to deliver. And now, because Caloran had frozen the deal, that gap wasn't theoretical anymore. It was visible. That night, my badge worked again on the executive floor. No explanation, just restored. That's how you know you've crossed from employee problem into corporate risk. At 9, I got one more call, not from Blaze, from Maris. "I'm going to ask you one last question," she said, "and your answer decides whether we walk away." I didn't speak. I let her continue. "Are you willing," she said, "to put governance in writing, names, authority, escalation, and sign off that it matches reality?" My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "Yes," I said, "but I won't sign a lie." Maris exhaled quietly. "Good." Then she added almost softly, "Because if your VP tries to sell us another story, I'm not freezing the deal again. I felt my skin prickle. "What will you do?" I asked. She paused and said, "I'll send the footage." Then the line went dead. When someone starts cleaning up folders and controlling who can speak, that's not leadership, it's damage control. In these moments, don't fight with emotion. Build a timeline that can survive audit and legal review. The louder they get, the more you should write, save, and preserve. The footage arrived the next morning, not through Blay, not through sales, through legal. Tamsin called me into her office and closed the door. On her screen was an email from Calorin's general counsel with an attachment labeled like it belonged in a courtroom, not a procurement thread. Lobby camera, entry sequence, date/time. Tamsin clicked play. The video wasn't cinematic. No dramatic zooms. Just a wide, silent angle from above the lobby doors. You could see Maris Sato step forward. You could see her extend her hand toward me. You could see my hand start to rise. And then you could see Blaze do exactly what my memory had been screaming about for days. He stepped into the lane, turned his body like a gate, lifted his hand higher, and redirected the handshake to himself. Maris's hand stayed suspended for a beat, an unmistakable beat, before she withdrew. Even without audio, the message was clear. Your solutions lead is not recognized. Your accountability is performative. Tamsin paused the video and sat back. "It's worse than I thought," she said. "What happens now?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She opened another document, an internal delegation matrix, and slid it toward me. "Here's the problem," she said. Calorin requested delegation letters. We looked. Blaze has been making commitments as if he had authority to approve field changes and service credits. But formal delegation doesn't match. I stared at the matrix. Certain approvals required signatures from legal and the CFO's office. But Blaze had been writing emails as if his title alone made him sovereign. "That's why he panicked," I said quietly. "That's why he tried to isolate you," Tamsin replied. "And that's why Maris froze procurement." Then she looked at me. "Maris gave us a path," she said, "but it has conditions." "What conditions?" "She will proceed," Tamsin said, "if we put governance in writing with named accountability, and if we correct any misrepresentation formally." Formally, meaning someone would be on record as the reason the deal paused, and someone would take the hit. Tamsin opened her email draft. "We're offering a governance addendum signed by legal and finance. We're naming you as operational owner, and we're documenting authority limits so procurement can't claim ambiguity." I felt a strange mix of relief and pressure. Being named operational owner wasn't a reward, it was accountability, real accountability, and Blaze would hate it. At 11, the executive meeting happened. This time, I was invited. Not because Blaze wanted me there, because legal demanded it. The room was full. Corin Hale, H.R. Lena, Tamsin, 2 finance directors, Blaze, and the CEO of our company, Siren Wicks, a man who spoke rarely and listened like a judge. The video was played on the big screen. Nobody spoke while it ran. When it ended, Siren looked at Blaze for a long moment. Blaze tried first with charm. "That was a misunderstanding," he said lightly. "The optics were unfortunate, but it wasn't intentional." Siren raised a hand, not angry, final. "Don't," he said. Blaze's mouth shut. Siren turned to Tamsin. "Authority issue?" Tamsin didn't hesitate. "Yes. Procurement requested delegation letters. Blaze represented authority, beyond formal delegation in writing." Blaze leaned forward, suddenly urgent. "That's not fair. Everyone does this. We can't close deals if legal slows everything down." Finance Director Sen Ward cut in. "You weren't just moving fast. You were committing us." Corin Hale finally spoke, voice controlled. "And you tried to erase the record afterward." Blaze snapped his head. "Excuse me?" Corin slid a printed page across the table. The audit log request from AT Governance and the timestamps of permission changes. Blaze's face went pale in a way no one could pretend not to see. Siren spoke again, quieter now. You blocked a handshake, he said. Then you blocked access. Then you tried to make the solutions lead the scapegoat. Blaze's voice softened, pleading now. Siren, I was protecting the company. No, Siren said. You were protecting yourself. The room didn't erupt. There was no shouting. That's not how it happens at that level. It happens with decisions stated like weather. Siran looked at HR. Remove Blaze from the account, he said, effective immediately. Blaze stared like he'd been slapped. Then Siren looked at me. Corin, he said, you'll lead the governance response. Legal and finance will co-sign. No improvisation. No ego. I nodded once. Understood. Blaze stood up fast, chair scraping. So you're rewarding him? After he... Siren didn't even look at him. Sit down, he said, or leave. Blaze left, and the door closing behind him felt like something unclenching in the building. That afternoon, we sent Caloran the new package. Governance appendix with named authority escalation chain mapped to real approvals. Delegation letters attached a written statement acknowledging the handshake incident as a failure of internal accountability, optics, and a commitment. All scope changes must be approved through legal and finance. Maras replied within an hour, one sentence. Proceed to final review. Procurement resumed. The deal didn't just thaw. It reset, on terms that matched reality. 2 weeks later, the contract was signed, and the first time I walked into Caloran's lobby after that, Maris met me at the door. No cameras, no audience. She offered her hand. This time, nobody stepped in front of it. I shook her hand and felt something I hadn't felt in months at my own company. Respect that wasn't performative. Later that day, Jude texted me. Blaze resigned. HR says it was mutual. Mutual is what companies call consequences when they want it to sound clean. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't gloat. I just opened my folder and archived the final signed governance appendix next to the timeline that started it all. Because the lesson wasn't karma. The lesson was simpler and honestly more useful. If someone treats you like you're invisible in a high-stakes room, it's not a social insult. It's a governance signal. And when governance breaks, the people who survive aren't the loudest. They're the ones who can prove what happened, line by line, until the truth becomes the only story left. In the end, I didn't win by humiliating Blaze. I won by doing the thing he couldn't do, matching the narrative to reality.